Wendy sat down on the leather couch. I resisted the urge to pull out my phone's flashlight. No machines, no light, that breaks both rules. Maybe each god had one. 2 out of 7 already done, this wasn't so bad. Humor her, play along, I told myself. The little gods are very wise to know the future, I said cautiously. Maybe they knew you would have been in a car accident if you didn't get rid of machines. Or would have to clean up your own mess if you turned on the lights. Was that mold on the wall? I hope your security deposit wasn't too high. Wendy wasn't listening though. She stared at something on the stone mantel beside the TV. It looked like another garden gnome at first, but no. A stuffed animal? I took a step closer. Wide eyes blinked open, pale and shining. An owl. A real live owl ruffling its wings on the mantel. May I please visit my family, little god? Wendy asked the owl sweetly. I quickly scanned the rest of the room, looking for other hidden animals. Nothing. Then looking back, I stared at the owl, at the graffiti owl, spray painted in blue directly onto the television screen. The real animal was gone. Only its image in thick paint remained. Thank you. I will ask him too. Wendy pulled her knees up onto the leather couch and turned around to face the opposite wall. May I please? Another image. Dark red paint. A terrible mask with tusks like a wild boar. The graffiti image of a screaming demon. How had I not seen it before? Was it like the owl, a real demon truly there a moment before, and only now replaced by the paint image? Thank you. I will tell him. Wendy smiled at me. Her lipstick was the same color as the demon on the wall. They both said yes. As long as you also follow the third rule, no lies. I nodded, dumbfounded. No machines. No lights. No lies. Tell me all the rules now. I can't. The rules change. Sometimes thou shalt not kill is not a rule. I have never heard it in this house, so maybe it is allowed here. Then after an uncomfortable pause, you can laugh. I made a joke too. I won't really kill you. I didn't laugh. Well, you aren't allowed to lie either, so that's nice. Wendy stood and moved for the stairs. In a casual off-handed tone, she asked, do you think I'm mad? No lies? Yeah. But I don't think it's your fault. She paused to consider, but seemed content with that. Before following her up the stairs, I leaned over to run my finger over the blue graffiti owl on the TV screen. The paint was still wet. I hadn't just been too distracted by the real owl to notice. The image hadn't been there before, and now it was. I looked back at the red demon. No lies, your turn, I said. How long have you been talking with the little gods? From before you left for college, right? You didn't find them in this house. You brought them with you. Yes, Wendy whispered without turning. She hurried up the stairs, lingering briefly on the small balcony which overlooked the living room below. She stared down with a regal confidence at me while I climbed. At least she wasn't afraid. I moved slowly, carefully scanning the walls and ceiling for more graffiti. The owl had been real though. Was the demon face real? Were the eyes real? Of course not. There were spray-painted words too. It's not like there were real floating words in the air that turned to paint. That thought had been intended to reassure me by how ridiculous it was, but then I wondered if they were only snakes twisted into the shape of letters. Here on the dark stair, climbing through the madness of another mind, anything at all seemed possible. One of doors on the second floor was open, and Wendy was already inside. I heard her say, "May I please visit my family, little god?" I hesitated outside the door. A normal bedroom, a familiar bedroom. Neatly tucked pink blankets, cluttered with stuffed animals. Nature posters on the wall. Stacks of books, children's books, I didn't have to see the covers to know. It was the way Wendy had her bedroom when she was little. Every detail mimicked, all the way to the doll mansion which dominated her little writing desk. It was her Christmas gift one year, back when Mom and Dad were still getting along. Back when he was still making good money. Maybe it was a kind of therapy for Wendy, trying to stop time at the last point where the world made sense. Wendy prayed before the dollhouse and listened to a reply only she could hear. Then I thought I heard the whispers too, so soft, only my imagination. Mumbling, chanting, laughing, nothing. Just guessing what my sister must hear. I scanned behind me, a subtle betrayal of my own confidence. There blazoned in fresh red paint across the wall, the mask of the demon painted beside me. And where its tusks should be, real bone pierced through the wallpaper to stick out from the wall. I didn't turn my back on it as I maneuvered to the door to Wendy's room, slamming it shut and leaning heavily on it. The fourth rule, Wendy said at last. Her voice was cold and calm, the words almost clicking with their precision. Thou shalt not fear. From these little tricks. Easy. Wendy turned to smile at me. You see. These are good rules. They are for our own good. She kept smiling, wider now, stretching unnaturally far. A trick of her lipstick extending beyond her mouth perhaps, but no. The smile kept extending until it split her entire face across. And so many teeth. Teeth which were not even separated from one another, but carved from the same block of white wood. It wasn't lipstick, but red paint, with the rough wooden grain of her lips clearly visible. In Wendy's hand she clutched a doll which wore a wide-brimmed hat and yellow dress, just like her. Let us leave behind our fear in this house, brother. It will only make us suffer. I backpedaled, knocking hard into the door. I forgot it was closed. But I wouldn't open it to face the painted demon, the thing which whispers, the little god. I was leaving this madhouse with my sister. Daylight would reveal these tricks for what they were. What happens if you break a rule? I asked. I bounced off the wall and dashed for the closed shades. Wendy made an awful screech. I wouldn't look at the wretched puppet. Reaching for the string, my fingers around it, but I could not pull. There was a rule against the light, and I was a wretched sinner for needing its salvation. An angry chorus of accusing whispers rose in my mind. Hissing, spitting in their anger. A mounting roar from an unseen crowd, cursing in a language I didn't know. Wendy's warning screech drowned out, my pounding blood drowned out, my own thoughts, overwhelmed by the anger at my own action. I felt ugly and wrong, as though acting against my own nature. Holding the string of the shades felt like holding a knife to the throat of an innocent. I was crushed by the moral guilt of daring to challenge one of the sacred rules. No light. No fear. Wendy's wooden jaw clicked. I looked longingly at the warm sun sneaking between the cracks of closed shades. I released the string. I released my fear. I turned around and stared at the wooden creature kneeling on the floor. 3 more rules, I said, breathless. Then we go. 3 more little gods. Wendy bent her head away from me as she stood, her face concealed beneath her broad hat. Then looking again, the wooden texture was gone. Her mouth was the proper width again, her teeth clean and bright and human. She opened the door, and her smile was steady and confident while she waited for me. She said the rules were good for us. What if she was right? She was such an emotional wreck in high school, but there was no denying she had transformed herself completely. This was a powerful woman who would get what she wanted. What was so bad about leaving behind fear and lies? If these spirits were real, then could they really be helping and protecting her? Back in the hallway, the walls bare. The painted red demon was gone. 2 holes remained, ripped wallpaper drywall beneath where the tusks pierced through. I think the demon was one of the little gods, but it was the only one following us. I was afraid when Father left, Wendy said. What would happen to us? What was wrong with us, to be worth less than the television? Wendy sighed. She marched ahead of me down the hall, straight toward another closed bedroom on the second floor. I didn't know then that fear was against the rules. I would have been so much happier if I had been good. But I understand now how wicked I had been, and how right it is for the wicked to suffer. I flinched at the way she savored the word suffer. Like it was some kind of medicine, bitter to taste, but necessary to live. She opened the door and revealed a dark room without any windows. Not even the tiniest sliver of sun. I could not see past the doorway and the frayed carpet which was ripped to shreds to leave bare floorboard within. "What's the fifth rule?" I begged. Wendy only smiled and stepped into the yawning void. Whether this waking nightmare was real or not, it was real to Wendy. And I could only save her by following her into the dark. I left the door open behind me this time and stood there while Wendy recited her rhythmic chant, "May I please visit my family, little God?" Maybe I hadn't always listened to Wendy before. But I listened now, intent on each word. Was there another texture in her voice, another wooden click? Her words did seem more distant than they ought to. Was the sound I heard her speaking at all, or a monster which mimicked her voice? It was so dark, there was no way to know. She might as well be alone as long as I stood on the threshold. I stepped into the black room, my hands gingerly probing the air in front of me. She had only been a few steps ahead. Shouldn't I feel her? The fifth rule, do not hate. Wendy's voice sounded more distant than ever. Her words were almost insubstantial, drifting across an unseen lake. "I don't hate anyone," I insisted. "No lies." Wendy wailed. The angry chorus roared in my head at once. Scolding whispers. The shame. I hadn't even realized I was lying. The words came to me so automatically, but maybe I didn't stop to think what they really meant. "Do you hate me?" It was a new voice in the dark. So alien, yet so familiar. It was the first time I heard my father's voice in years, and now it came from right over my shoulder. My arms raised and flailing, I spun in a circle and probed the blackness. Only then I realized I could not see a speck of light from the door I entered. It was dark in every direction, so deep that not even shadows passed over one another. There was no light or strength in me which could endure. "I'm talking to you, boy." The blow came hard and sharp against my right ear. I stumbled to my knees, catching myself on the rough wooden floorboards. "Do you hate me?" my father's gruff voice demanded. I was frozen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to accidentally lie. My ears stung like mad, maybe I was even more afraid of the truth. "I hated you," Wendy's voice from so far away. "Before I knew it was against the rules. And I suffered for it, Daddy. You didn't make me suffer. I deserved to suffer. I was wicked, Daddy." "Be quiet," I pleaded. "I won't ask you again," came my father's gruff voice. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't let myself be afraid. And if I wasn't afraid, then I wasn't weak. And if nothing made me weak, then there was nothing to hate. I would not break the rules. "No," I said hoarsely. "I don't hate you, Dad. And I don't hate you, Wendy. I think it's a good rule, not to hate. And that you should probably remember not to hate yourself while you're at it." I cannot say there was a light which led me from that room. Instead, I no longer let myself hate the darkness, and moved and felt freely until the doorway presented itself. I exited back into the dimly lit hallway, with Wendy close behind. My breathing was shallow but calm. I felt in control. "Where's the sixth little god?" I asked. Wendy nodded upward, tilting her sunglasses at a string dangling from a little trapdoor in the ceiling. The ladder for an attic, revealed as Wendy pulled it down. I stepped back and gave her deliberate space, looking everywhere but the yellow sundress rising up the stairs. I looked at the demon face painted onto the wall. The paint faded to nothing before my eyes, withdrawing along with the tusks which left 2 new holes. The paint did not reappear, but a pair of yellow eyes burned through the openings in the wall. It was all a game. A test. I would not show fear, but that didn't mean I had to stick around with it either. I jumped up the ladder 2 rungs at a time, hauling myself hand over hand onto the wooden platform above. "Wendy!" I called tentatively. The thick air made me gag. More than mold or stench, it felt like I was swallowing a lungful of tiny insects with every breath. I made my way toward the small square of light, a boarded-up window. It wasn't enough to see anything besides a few inches of rough uninsulated wood. "Where are you, Wendy? Where's the 6th one? What's the rule?" My fingers traced the board over the window. I wanted to rip it off so badly. It was getting dark outside anyway. There wouldn't even be much light that came in, just a little clean air. My lungs and throat tingled with the texture. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized each piece of minuscule debris I breathed in was itself wriggling and crawling within my lungs. Countless little creatures, spreading so deep as to become part of me. I wanted the light, but I must not have the light. I wanted to scream, but I must not be afraid, and dare not breathe to do so. I wanted to hate Wendy for bringing me into her nightmare. But I could not hate her, because I felt pity for her, enduring the clutch of the little gods alone these years. I felt sorry for every mean thing I said, and the part one played in driving her away. "The 6th rule," Wendy's voice came softly at my ear, "is not to hope. Hope. That's not a good rule. Hope isn't like hate. You can't get rid of hope. The rules are the only thing that keep us safe," she insisted earnestly. "I was like you before I learned, for we can only learn through our suffering." How many days I told myself not to worry about that day, because I would move on with my life when Dad came home. And how many nights I held on to that hope, that redemption, that forgiveness for being the awful person I was becoming. That hope rotted inside me. It was poison. So the little gods said it was not allowed. "Thou shalt not hope." Not to hope, and not to fear. How could I do both? How could I do anything at all without hope of my action matching? I realized what was happening now, that each aspect of my humanity was being shed from me. But I could not break the rules. How could I have any hope, when each breath tingled with the invisible creatures permeating my body? How could I hope against the moral condemnation, hope against the whispers which rose bitter in my mind? They were part of me now, and there could be no hope of them ever letting go. I did not understand the whispered words, but I felt their intent to steal my awareness. How dare I challenge the rules which kept me from suffering? Who am I hurting but myself for these wicked desires? I must not give in to hope. "The sun has set," Wendy said. The sliver of light grew a little stronger. Wendy was shifting the board which blocked the window. The sky was dark, but a little moonlight was salvation to me. But even this was not hope. There was no escape from this. The voices would not cease, rising and falling within me as waves of emotion which were not my own. What was left of me was at the mercy of these laws which I could not question. The final rule. Wendy carefully removed her sunglasses at last. I flinched, but was not afraid of what I saw. How could I be afraid of what had happened to my sister, when I had already given up hope for us? 2 tusks. Piercing from her skin, where the eyes should be. Just as they had done from the wallpaper. The bony spurs pulled back into her head, and the yellow eyes of the demon peered at me through the bloody sockets. The final rule. My sister's voice, but not her voice. It was her words inside my mind, one of the whispers from the angry gods. The final rule is that you take us with you. The little gods will go with you when you visit your family. They will be with you always, to keep you safe from suffering. No machines. 30 miles. We both chose to walk. No light. We would cover the distance before the sun rose. No lies. That is wise. We will make the world a kinder place. No fear. At what I had become. Even walking 30 miles, with blisters bloody and sore, the little gods told me I did not feel pain. Maybe I did, if I really focused on it. But my feet and my body seemed so far away, and the voices were so close. I was their vessel, and they sailed me safely through the storm. No hate. But only pity. For the lost and blind who wandered through their anguished lives without little gods to show their way. Through the noise within my head, part of me which was still me protested against the madness I was thrall. But that part of me was small and quiet, and did not dare to question the rules. Each step another rationalization that I was still the one in control. I even convinced myself that I was becoming more free the farther I left that house, but it was all a lie. The little gods were with me still. No hope. They were in my lungs, in my blood, in my thoughts, screaming and then quiet. Challenging, mocking me for my every thought and focus. I had no hope for myself, but kept guarded in me a secret flame of hope for others who have not yet been claimed by the little gods. I would not bring this curse home to my mother. And yet my feet walked as if on their own, and I could not muster the strength to challenge them. All night walking weary along empty streets, until the first hint of morning gave me pause. We must hurry. Wendy grabbed me roughly by the arm and dragged me onward, but I resisted. No light. It was a rule. But if I could only slow my pace a little bit, then the light would come again. Just by standing here until the sun, I would break the rule. I would suffer, but I could not stop the sun from rising. If I could only stop my body, then I would break the first rule. And that would give me enough strength to break the rest. I'm going as fast as I can. A lie. I was holding back. I was testing my limits, and I was breaking the rules. I planted my feet and stopped where I was. I have a cramp in my thigh. Give me a minute. Another lie. Bitter whispers creeping through my thoughts. The little gods were catching on. They would force me onward, or make a new rule on the spot. I only had to resist until the light. I sat down on side of the street. Then lying flat, spreading my arms and legs wide as though to plant myself where I was. Nothing would move me. A lone car honked and flashed its brights at me, but I would not stir. The sun would come, and I would be the tree which drank in its light. I would break every rule. I would be afraid, and scream for any who cared to listen. And let me hate, for there are evil things in this world, and it is right that I should hate them. And on I hope, if only the sun would come again, then this suffering too shall come and pass. I lay on the side of the road until the morning light engulfed me. My skin tingled as though melting ice. And deep inside, the squirming protest of each part of me which fought back, until at last the peace and quiet, the birds breaking the rules alongside me with their hope for the new day. Wendy was gone. Fleeing for darker places, no doubt. But I walk through these days unafraid. I will follow only the rules I make, and when I make mistakes, and I will not hide from my own suffering. My resolve is not some epiphany, felt once and preserved forever. It is the daily struggle, and the nights like this where I sit at my desk. I feel the thing squirming in my chest, and I hear the whispers of the little gods. So I will keep the lights off tonight for respect, and I will write this note of warning not to hide from suffering. These words you can trust, for I must not tell lies.